This is Thinner Peace in Menopause and Beyond with Dr. Deb Butler. This is episode number 267. Welcome to Thinner Peace in Menopause and Beyond. This is Dr. Deb Butler, Master Life and Weight Coach, and as always, your coach. If you're a woman and you're smart and you're successful and you've been struggling with weight your whole life, and now menopause is making it harder than ever, and you are ready to make this the last time you ever have to go on a diet again, then this podcast is for you. Stay tuned. Hello, all my dear friends. How are you today? Spring is here. Summer is coming. How are you? How are you? If I would be sitting with you right now, or talking to you on the phone like I do with my clients, or if I'm doing a Zoom call and looking at you directly, and I looked at you and I said to you, how are you feeling? What would you say right now? I'd like you to just think about that for a minute, to go inside your body and just see what you're feeling and where you're feeling it at. And you have probably heard me talking over these last few episodes all about processing emotions. And one of the things that I talk a lot about in my groups and with my individual clients is this whole concept of self-compassion. And basically, compassion is being able to feel and be empathetic with somebody else's suffering. And self-compassion is being able to recognize your own suffering and to be empathetic about that. And what I find for most of us and most of my clients is that it's very easy to be compassionate for other people because I think we've been taught how to do that. In fact, I was speaking with one of my dearest friends who's 97 years old, and I was talking to her about this concept. And it was so interesting because what she said to me is, I've never heard the term self-compassion. I've only heard compassion. And she is a wise, wise woman. And so we started discussing it, and she just really went inside herself to be thinking about this, which really makes me want to talk to you about it more because I don't think that we're taught it. And I don't think as women, we think that feeling warm feelings towards ourselves when we're suffering is acceptable. And this podcast is all about making it acceptable. Because listen, when you're suffering is when you need your own compassion the most. And if you're anything like I was, and sometimes like I am, when you're suffering, you give yourself a hard time. And half the time that you're suffering is because you're creating the suffering for yourself because you're being so hard on yourself. So how do you go easier on yourself? How do you create space and warmth for when you're not feeling at your best or when things aren't going your way? I want you to think about that. And I want to read you something from a book called Self-Compassion by Kristin Neff. She is one of my most favorite authors. I talk to you about her a lot. I use her in all of my teachings because I think that she is the expert on self-compassion. And the reason she is because she actually did her dissertation for her PhD on self-compassion. What a concept. And Brené Brown years earlier did her dissertation on shame. So it's interesting that as women are coming along, we're starting to look at these terms in a different way and being able to help ourselves use them in a way that will help us. So I want to talk to you a little bit. I want to give you a couple of techniques on how you can use self-compassion. And I want to read to you a little bit from Kristin Neff's book on self-compassion. I'm going to give you a couple techniques, and I want to give you some of her reading on the joy of self-compassion. Because seriously, if you can learn how to use self-compassion, it is joyful. Like you can make yourself feel better. So, for those of you who, when I asked for you to go inside and see how you feel, for those of you who are feeling negative emotion right now about anything, I just want you to listen up because I want to show you how you can make that feeling, give it space for that feeling, and in a way, maybe even help yourself feel better, not by trying to change your thinking or anything like that, but just be able to hold space for your emotion. Like if it was a young child, I always like to talk about children, my grandchildren, your grandchildren, your nieces, your nephews, your students, young children, when they're feeling bad emotions, when they're feeling negative emotions. What you most want to do for them, what do you most want to do for them, right? Is you want to give them space to feel what they feel. Tell them it's okay. It's all right. It will pass, but right now I understand, darling. You might hold them. You might hug them. You might let them cry, right? But you give them space to be where they are. And because I know you know how to do that, which is called compassion, I want to show you how you can use self-compassion. And so Kristen Neff explains in her book on the joy of self-compassion, she talks about open-heartedness. And I just want to read you a little bit about what she wrote. And then I want to talk about a few different techniques that you can use to help yourself feel better, how to give yourself compassion. So this is what she says about open-heartedness, which is a part of self-compassion. When we give ourselves compassion, we are opening our hearts in a way that transforms our lives. What does it mean to be open-hearted? It's a phrase that we use all the time, but what does it actually mean? Open-heartedness is a state of emotional receptivity in which even unpleasant or negative experiences are held with caring concern. When we kiss the boo-boo on a child's hurt finger or listen empathetically to a dear friend telling us their woes, when we feel compassion, in other words, we experience an inner warmth spreading out from the center of our chest. This feeling is what lets us know that our hearts are open. I really want you to hear that. That warm feeling that you're feeling throughout your chest is a way to let you know that your heart is open. And how does it feel to have an open heart? Pretty darn good. When compassion is flowing through our veins, we feel at our vibrant best, connected, alive, plugged in. When we unlock our hearts, new experiences are free to emerge. Experiences of love, courage, and unlimited possibility. When our hearts are closed, however, we remain unmoved by life's sorrows. As we shut out the pain, we also shut ourselves down. Our fear of being overwhelmed by negative emotions leads us to tune out so that we feel only constriction in the center of our chest. See, she's talking about what happens when you resist negative emotion. And you know I've been talking all about allowing negative emotion. So what she goes on to say is the price paid for protecting our hearts is to cut off our very lifeblood. We feel cold, empty, unhappy, and deeply unsatisfied. And the time when our hearts are most likely to close is when our pain is caused by negative self-judgment, when we feel we aren't good enough in some way. We often incredibly callous when we are relating to our own inadequacies and imperfections, meaning that much of the time we're slamming the door of our heart right in our own face. Fortunately, when we decide to hold our flawed humanity with compassion, everything changes. By responding to our own pain with a sense of kindness and connection, by soothing and comforting ourselves when faced with the imperfection of ourselves or our lives, we are creating new positive emotions that weren't there a moment earlier. Instead of just feeling inadequate, we now both feel inadequate and connected in remembering the shared aspect of the human experience. Instead of just feeling sadness, we now both feel sadness and the sweet tenderness of concern for a wound that needs healing. I'm interjecting right here. She's relating to this as I was speaking to you about a child that's in pain and how you work with that. And that's what she's talking about now, except it's you. Instead of just feeling inadequate, we now both feel inadequate and connected in remembering the shared aspect of the human experience. Instead of just feeling sadness, we both now feel sadness and the sweet tenderness of concern for a wound that needs healing. Instead of just feeling frightened, we now both feel frightened and comforted by our own kindness and caring. By relating to ourselves with compassion, we are holding our negative emotions in the warm embrace of a good feeling. And this means that hidden with every moment of anguish lies the potential for contentment. Pain can become the doorway to happiness because feeling loved, cared for, and connected is what makes us truly happy. So I want you to really think about this, just like when I was talking to you about a child that needs comforting. You need comforting so you can actually feel sad and feel comforted at the same time in your body. And she goes on to say that she remembered the first time that she learned how to use self-compassion when she was going through a really difficult time. She was finishing her dissertation and she had a fight with her ex-husband, and somebody said some terrible words to her and she was running late on her dissertation. And so she goes on to talk about that. The deadline for submitting her final draft of her dissertation was coming up, and she was behind in her work, and she was seriously wondering if she really had what it took to become an academic, right? So the brain and the mind come in now and start telling you some terrible, terrible things. The brain starts questioning, would I ever get a real job? Will I ever have a happy and uncomplicated life? The brain just starts going crazy. And she talks about, as she started thinking all of this, she was rolled up into a tight black ball of insecurity, fear, and self-loathing. Have you ever been there before? I'm just interjecting. I want you to hear this as she goes on to talk about how she helps herself. So she says, then I remembered self-compassion. And what did the teacher say again? That's what she's saying to herself. That's what I want you to say. What did Dr. Deb say again? And then she thought to herself, oh yeah, that's right. Just be mindful of what you're experiencing. Observe each thought and emotion as it arises and describe it gently without trying to resist it or push it away. So she goes on to say, okay, I think I can do that. Let's see. I feel shame. It's tightness in my throat, pressure, pain in my stomach, heaviness, sinking. I feel fear, pressure in the back of my head, heart beating fast, hard to breathe. All right, now try giving myself some compassion for how hard it is to feel this way right now. As she writes this, first she goes on to say, I can't feel anything. But then she goes on to say, I'm going to try giving myself a little hug. And then she starts feeling some warmth. Warm tingles rising up my arms, softness, and then the tears came, deep wells of grief, as I allowed myself to feel how hard it was at that moment. It's okay, she says to herself. Life is hard sometimes, and it's okay. Everyone has these moments, and I'm here for you, and I care about you. That's how I want you to talk about yourself when you're having these moments. And when she goes on to say, everyone has these moments. It's very important for you to say that to yourself, because when we're in the midst of all of these emotions, we think we're the only ones. And part of self-compassion is realizing that this is humanity. This is how human beings are. So as she's going on, she says she starts having little waves of contentment spreading from the center of her face, quieting. Each time a new painful feeling arose, I would hold it in my awareness like this and describe it mentally, and then send myself compassion for feeling it. And then I would hold the feeling of compassion in my awareness, describing it and feeling it in my body, savoring how good it felt to be cared for. After things quieted down and another painful feeling would soon rise up and round I'd go through the whole cycle again. And it went on like this for about an hour. Yet after a while, I realized that my predominant experience was no longer an unpleasant one. Change was afoot. Instead of being stuck in the pain, my awareness was increasingly resting in the feeling of love, kindness, and connectedness that held the pain. As it did, the pain itself started to soften, the worry to lift, and I began to feel a lightness in my body. It was perhaps the first time I had really opened my heart to myself, and I started to feel almost giddy, like I had drunk a glass of champagne for the first time. Or perhaps it was more like drinking a glass of vintage red wine. The flavors were rich, deep, spicy, and complex. I felt centered, stable, at peace. I realized that these beautiful sensations I experienced were not contingent on things going the way I wanted them to. They didn't depend on receiving praise or being successful or having a perfect relationship. I realized that my own heart was a deep well I could drink from at any time, and that ironically, I would be most likely to remember to drink from that well when things were at their most difficult. I had found something that would change my life forever, and I was grateful beyond words. So I really want you just to think about this, what she's talking about. Is this whole idea of what I've talked to you on the podcast before this, about processing emotions and feeling the feelings in your body, and then at the same time, giving yourself that warmth or self-compassion for how you're feeling. So it's like you're holding yourself in your own arms as you're suffering. You're helping yourself feel better as if somebody else was hugging you and telling you that everything was going to be okay, but it's you. That is self-compassion. So I want to give you an exercise that she gave in this book, and I want you to try it. And I'd love for you to email me and let me know if this works for you. So this is how she talks about what you can do when you're feeling these negative emotions, when you're in the grip of something happening to you that you don't want or that you don't like. It could be something as simple as overeating, not sticking to maybe a drink plan that you had, or maybe you're on a binge, maybe you had a storm eat. I've talked to you so much about all of that, that usually what one tends to do is punish themselves for this. But this is where self-compassion comes in. And this is what you would do. She calls it transforming negativity. So she says the next time you find yourself in the grip of negative emotions, try generating some positive emotions to go alongside them. You can use the following phrases when you're stuck in negativity, designed to validate the human experience. So this is how she says to do it. Start first with the feeling that you're feeling. So let's just say you feel frustrated. So you would say to yourself, it's hard to feel frustrated right now. And then you say to yourself, the next phrase is, feeling frustrated is part of the human experience. What can I do to make myself happier in this moment? Those are the 3 phrases that you use to transform negativity. The first one is, it's hard to feel, you fill in the blank. I just used frustration. Feeling blank or feeling frustration is a part of the human experience. And 3, what can I do to make myself feel happier in this moment? The first phrase compassionately acknowledges the difficulty of having negative emotions. So you recognize the frustration or you recognize the shame. You can even go as far as to say where you feel it in your body, like she spoke about earlier. The second phrase is a reminder that negative emotions are a normal, natural part of being human and therefore should not be judged. Now, the third phrase helps you get in touch with your desire to be happy. This may enable you to broaden your focus. You might find creative ways to reset your buttons. You might do something like take a hot bath or consider what's good about your present situation. There's almost always something good in any given moment. Now, these steps are not taken to resist being in a negative frame of mind, but because you want health and well-being for yourself. That's why you're doing it, not to change it, but to hold space for it as a way of creating well-being for yourself. Now, once you say these phrases, your negative mood may start to lift, and it may be replaced by a feeling of calm contentment. You might even be able to have a sense of humor about it all, and nothing lifts a bad mood like a good chuckle. So I just want you to think about how to change negativity with these 3 steps of creating self-compassion by 1, validating your feelings, validating the feelings in your body by saying these 3 things. It's hard to feel whatever the emotion is right there. Like I used frustration, I have that a lot, or disappointment or shame. And then feeling this is a part of a human experience. You just tell yourself you're not the only one. It's so important. She talks about so much in self-compassion about the idea of humanity. And even when I'm talking about thinner peace and I'm talking about weight loss and I'm talking about learning how to be self-compassionate, that you realize you're not the only one, right? And so I think the reason in groups it's so powerful is because you really get to realize that. And then remember, the 3rd phrase, what you say to yourself in the 3rd phrase is, what can I do to make myself happier in this moment? And you just ask yourself, it's kind of like if you're taking a little child that's really crying and you hold space and you hug them and you let them tell you. And then you look at them, is there anything that I can do right now to make you feel a little bit better? And sometimes they come up with something, right? Well, I don't know, maybe, and they might come up with something. Right? They just think about what could I use right now that might make me feel a little bit better? And you give it to yourself. So I really want you to think about that this week, transforming negativity with using self-compassion. And I would never, ever, ever end any podcast with, what I'm going to tell you. But I want you to know that self-compassion can change everything for you. Right? Because it allows you to make mistakes without making things worse. And as I talk to women about thinner peace and I help women lose weight, the way that it's so successful is because of this one concept: using self-compassion, processing your emotions, learning how to feel your emotions, and giving yourself space for that. So all my dear ones, if you need help, I do mini sessions where you can find out more about this incredible program that I offer for my individual clients. It's individual coaching. All you have to do is go to drdebbutler.com/work with me, and we can talk to see if this is a good fit for you. But no matter what else you do this week, I taught you about self-compassion. I gave you these 3 phrases. Now you know what I'm going to say. Wherever you do, wherever you go, please, please, please be kind to yourself. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. If you've been loving my podcast, please, please, please subscribe. And also, please, please, please review if you're loving it. The way you heard about it is the way many people hear about it. They Google it or they look for it. And the only way that it pops up is by who reviews it. So if you're loving it, let's pass on the good word and the good news. Thank you.